Alright guys, this video is going to go over the questions on the quiz that you just got back from Monday. I gave you the answer key, but this will show step-by-step working through the solutions, and you can see where you had issues and what you still don't understand. Use this as you're completing Form B in addition to the answer key. So the first question says to circle the expression that isn't equivalent to the other two, and you have to explain why your choice is not equivalent. And so the very first thing we need to do is actually evaluate them to decide which one's equivalent and which ones aren't. And that's what I did not see a lot of on your test. I should have seen a step-by-step. So if I start with this left example, this is 2 times negative 3 times 5. I'll start with the 2 times negative 3. That's negative 6. And I still have the times 5. Negative 6 times 5 is negative 30. The next one is negative 10 times negative 3. A negative times a negative is a positive number. It's positive 30. So already, these two aren't equivalent. And so it'll depend on the solution to this last one in deciding which one we're choosing. But this is 7 times negative 4 minus 2. A lot of you chose or thought that this was a multiplication problem all the way across. And if that were true, this negative 2 would have been in parentheses to show its multiplication. So 7 times negative 4 is negative 28. And negative 28 minus 2, or negative 28 plus a negative 2, is negative 30. So the first and third example were both equal to negative 30. But the example in the middle was equal to positive 30. So you should have chosen this example in the middle, the negative 10 times negative 3. And in all of what I just said, some of that should have been in your written explanation. So you have a sample written explanation on the answer key that goes through me solving all three of those problems. So let me get rid of this. And then we'll scroll down to the next question. This question was saying, which expression, only one of them, is equivalent to the expression negative 2 minus negative 7? Show work or explain to justify your response. In this problem, we should have seen you correctly using add the opposite in order to decide which ones were equivalent. And so I needed to start with the original expression, negative 2 minus a negative 7. When we add the opposite, there's three things we need to keep in mind. The first is that our first number doesn't change at all, so it's negative 2. Now, if I were answering questions on this quiz, I see that the first number is negative 2, and I would look over here and notice that a couple of them are positive 2. So I would keep that in mind as, oh, those probably can't be right, but I wouldn't cross anything out just yet. The second thing we need to do is change subtraction to addition. We're adding the opposite of the second number. So the third thing is we need to change that sign of our second number. Right now it's negative 2 minus negative 7. It becomes negative 2 plus a positive 7, or just negative 2 plus 7. I saw a lot of you trying to actually evaluate each one of these, which is fine. I didn't really need to do that though. I was only picking one option, and when I used add the opposite, I got negative 2 plus 7, and you can see that option D is negative 2 plus 7. So in your explanation of this one, we should have seen that you know the steps to follow in adding the opposite. So the next thing we'll do is we will look at the simplification of expression problems on the second page. So there were 3 of them, and we saw kind of different issues with each one. So that first question was negative 2/5 plus 5/10, or plus 0.5. As soon as you see that you have a fraction and a decimal, you have to change one of them. You can change them both to fractions, both to decimals. On your sample answer key, I showed you changing them both to decimals, but I'll walk through both of them here. So I saw a lot of 2/5 is equal to 2.5. Remember, if we're changing a decimal to, or a fraction to a decimal, we have to actually do the long division to convert it, because this is saying 2 divided by -5. That's what that fraction bar means, is division. So I would rewrite that as 2 divided by 5. And 5 does not go into 2, but it goes into 24 times. And 5 times 4 is 20, so we're already done. Just don't forget it's a negative. And so if I change them both to decimals, this problem would be -4/10 plus 5/10. Now at this point you have options. On the sample answer key I showed you a number line, so I won't show you that way on here. I would be thinking, if I were using rules, that I'm now adding two numbers that have different signs. One is positive, one is negative. And when I do that, my rule is I subtract the numbers. So 5/10 minus 4/10 is a 10. And then I keep the sign of the one that's further from 0. So if I look at 4/10 and 5/10, 5/10 is definitely further away from 0. It's 5 spaces away, where 4/10 is only 4 spaces away. And that 5/10 is a positive number. It means my answer is positive. So my answer should be a positive 1/10. I'm going to get rid of all the decimal conversion stuff and show you also how you could have used fractions in both cases, because I know some of you prefer that. For this particular problem, it definitely makes it more work for you, because you then have to find a least common denominator. Now remember, to change a decimal to a fraction, I think about, well, how do I say that? I don't really say it as 0.5. I say it as 5/10. So that's how I write it as a fraction. So now I have 2, -2/5 plus 5/10. And some of you did this, and then you added 5 and 10 as your denominators, and you got 15. You cannot add unlike denominators with fractions. So if I'm looking at my two fractions, 2/5 and 5/10, I should notice that I can change 2/5 to some number of tenths by multiplying by 2. So let me change the color of the pen. I'm going to write it over here. So in order to get to 10, I would multiply 5 by 2. I would do the same thing. This goes back to Unit 1 and equivalent ratios. 2 times 2 is 4. So -2/5 is equal to -4/10. Now I have -4/10 plus 5/10. And the same rule applies as before. Now we just have fractions instead of decimals. So I'm adding two numbers. The signs are different. I will subtract the numbers. So 5/10 minus 4/10 is 1/10. And the 5/10 is further away from 0, which means my answer is positive, since that 5/10 is positive. And those were both the ways you could have solved number 3. Number 4 also had two options. You either could have used distributive property, or you could have used order of operations. And I'll show you both ways. Most of you tried order of operations. I think distributive property is pretty new for us. I showed you distributive property on the solution guide. Remember, distributive property says that everything that's inside the parentheses has to be multiplied by what's outside. Think of when I distribute something, I'm distributing a paper for class, I give that pile of papers to a student. If I say distribute it, it means give one to everybody. So that means that 1/2 will be distributed with this -4 that's here and this 1/2. And we use multiplication. So 1/2 times -4 is -4 halves. And I'm going to bring down this subtraction sign. And 1/2 times 1/2 is 1/4. So now I've got -4/2 is also equal to just the whole number, or the integer 2, -2, minus 1/4. If I'm thinking about add the opposite, that becomes -2 plus -1/4, or -2 1/4. Now, if I wanted to use order of operations instead of distributive property, I'll just write this right next to it. I would do what's inside the parentheses first. So -4 minus 1/2. I'm actually just going to rewrite that as -4 plus -1/2. ignore that double parentheses there. It's just to show that this is a negative 1/2. So you distinguish it from this plus sign here. Now I've got 1/2 times -4 plus a negative 1/2. When my signs are the same and I'm adding, I add the numbers, so -4.5, and I keep the sign, which was negative. Now I have 1/2 times -4.5. And some of you didn't quite do this correctly. If I'm writing out multiplication of fractions, I can't really multiply the way that it's written. So if you remember how to change a mixed number to an improper fraction, I do the denominator times the whole number, and then to it, I add the numerator. My denominator is still going to be 2 here, but my numerator will be, so 2 times 4 is 8, plus 1 is 9. So -4.5 is also equal to -9/2. And don't forget to bring down the times 1/2. When I multiply fractions, I just multiply straight across. So I've got 1 times -9 is -9, and then 2 times 2 is 4. So I get -9/4 as an improper fraction, and I could keep it like that, which I definitely recommend you do when you're doing all of these conversions by hand, because there's nothing saying that you lose points for not simplifying a fraction. But what you do end up losing points for is simplifying a fraction incorrectly, because you end up doing extra work and getting the wrong answer. But if I simplified this, I would say 4 goes into 9 twice, and then there is 1 out of 4 left over. So either one of these options would have been fine. The last problem, number 5, was all multiplication. And that was one thing that I noticed a few of us struggled with, was identifying that that problem is all multiplication. They are all numbers that are separated by parentheses from each other. That tells us multiplication. So I'm just going to take it step by step. -2 times -4. When I multiply two negative numbers, the product is positive. So -2 times -4 is 8. 8 times -1/2. I'm going to rewrite 8 as 8/1 times -1/2. And again, when I multiply two fractions, it's just numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. So I have 8 times -1 is -8. And 1 times 2 is 2. So -8/2, which again is a perfectly fine answer. Or if you wrote it as an integer, -4. So please use this to help you in fixing, in doing Form B of your quiz, in addition to the actual sample answers that I gave you.